Clara Morrison dropped to her knees in the frozen mud. Her wedding ring caught the pale winter light as she held it up to the massive rancher blocking the auction gate. 4 days, she whispered, voice cracking. My children haven't eaten in 4 days. Please, take it. Take everything. Just let me buy enough grain to keep them alive. Jonas Brennan stared down at her, his jaw tight, his eyes unreadable. Behind them, the whole town watched and waited. If you want to know what happens next, subscribe to my channel and stay until the end. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The auction yard smelled of frozen manure and desperation. January 1886. And the cold had killed more cattle than any man could count. Clara Morrison pushed through the crowd, her children pressed against her patched wool coat. Emmett walked on her left, 10 years old, chin raised like his father taught him. Rosie clung to her right hand, 5 years old, silent as the grave. Clara's boots cracked through ice-crusted mud. Every step sent pain shooting through her worn soles. She hadn't felt her toes since yesterday morning. The auction platform rose ahead. Men in heavy coats lined the rails. Breath-fogging hands shoved deep in pockets. No one looked at her. No one ever looked at widows in winter. She pushed forward. Mama. Emmett's voice came low. People are staring. Let them. But I said let them. She reached the gate. A massive figure blocked her path. Jonas Brennan stood 6'3", shoulders broad enough to fill a doorway. His hat sat low, shadowing his face. A scar ran down his left jaw, white against weathered skin. Auctions for livestock holders only, ma'am. His voice was deep, flat. You got cattle to sell. Clara's fingers tightened around the ring in her pocket. The metal bit into her palm, cold as the wind cutting through her shawl. I have something better. Ma'am, I don't have time for 4 days. The words tore out of her throat. My children haven't eaten a real meal in 4 days. The grain merchant won't extend credit. The general store turned us away this morning. She pulled the ring from her pocket, held it up to the pale winter light. This was my mother's, then mine. It's all I have left. Please, I'll sell it for whatever you'll give. Just let me buy enough to feed them through the week. Jonas Brennan didn't move. His eyes dropped to the ring, then to the children behind her. Emmett stood, rigid fists clenched at his sides. Rosie pressed her face into Clara's skirt, hiding from the giant. Mama. Rosie's voice came muffled. I'm cold. Clara's chest cracked open. She felt it. The fracture spreading through her ribs, her spine, her heart. I know, baby. I know. She looked back up at Jonas Brennan. Please. The silence stretched. 10 seconds. 20. The crowd behind them had gone quiet. Clara could feel their eyes on her back, could hear the whispers starting. Poor thing. Should have remarried by now. Samuel Morrison left her with nothing but debt and 2 mouths to feed. Jonas Brennan reached into his coat. Clara's breath stopped. He pulled out a fold of bills, counted out $5, pressed them into her empty hand. Feed your children, Mrs. Morrison. His voice was still flat, but something flickered behind his eyes. Something almost like pain. The ring stays yours. Clara stared at the money. $5. More than she'd seen in 3 months. I didn't ask for charity. I asked to sell. And I'm telling you no. He stepped aside, clearing the gate. The grain merchant's name is Pruitt. Tell him Jonas Brennan sent you. He'll give you fair weight. She didn't move. Couldn't. Ma'am. His voice dropped lower. Take your children home. Feed them. We'll settle accounts when the weather breaks. Emmett tugged her arm. Mama, come on. Clara closed her fingers around the bills. Her throat burned. Why? Jonas Brennan's jaw tightened. He looked away toward the mountains, toward something she couldn't see. Because I know what it looks like when a child goes hungry. He paused. And I don't have the stomach to watch it twice. He walked away before she could answer. His boots thudded against the wooden platform as he climbed up to join the auctioneer. Clara stood frozen in the gate. "Mama?" Emmett's voice cracked. "Who was that?" "I don't know." She slipped the ring back into her pocket, felt its familiar weight against her thigh. "I don't know." Boy. The grain merchant's shop smelled of wheat dust and kerosene. Clara stepped through the door, Emmett and Rosie behind her. The bell overhead chimed. Ezra Pruitt looked up from his ledger. He was a thin man, balding with spectacles perched on a narrow nose. His eyes moved from Clara to the children, then back to Clara. "Mrs. Morrison." His voice was careful, neutral. "I thought I made myself clear this morning. Jonas Brennan sent me." Pruitt's pen stopped. "He gave me money. Said you'd give fair weight." The silence stretched. Pruitt's spectacles caught the lamplight as he tilted his head. "Brennan sent you?" "Yes." "Personally?" "He was at the auction gate. I asked to sell my ring. He refused and gave me $5 instead." Pruitt set down his pen. He removed his spectacles, cleaned them slowly on his apron. "Mrs. Morrison, do you know who Jonas Brennan is? He runs the auction yard. Everyone knows that. He's also the largest landholder in the territory after Wade Sterling." Pruitt replaced his spectacles. "And the only man in Elkhorn who Sterling hasn't been able to buy or break." Clara's fingers tightened around the bills. "What does that have to do with grain?" "It means if Brennan sent you here, I'd be a fool to turn you away." He rose from his stool, moved toward the back of the shop. "How much do you need?" "Enough to last the week. Maybe 10 days if we're careful." Pruitt measured grain into a burlap sack, his movements efficient. He added a smaller bag of dried beans, a twist of salt wrapped in paper. "That'll be $3 even." Clara counted out the bills. Hesitated. "Keep the change as credit, Mrs. Morrison." Pruitt's voice softened. "You'll need it before spring." "I don't want charity." "It's not charity, it's business." He pushed the sack across the counter. "Brennan's credit is good. If he vouched for you, that's enough for me." Emmett stepped forward, lifted the sack onto his shoulder. He was too small for the weight, but he didn't complain. He never complained. "Thank you," Clara managed. Pruitt nodded once. "Mrs. Morrison, a word of advice." She paused at the door. "Wade Sterling has been asking about your property. The homestead, the water rights, all of it. He came in yesterday wanting to know if you'd been buying on credit if you were behind on payments." Pruitt's eyes were steady behind his spectacles. "I told him I didn't know, but he'll find out soon enough." Clara's stomach dropped. "Why is Sterling interested in my land?" "I don't know, but when Sterling gets interested in something, people tend to lose it." He picked up his pen, returned to his ledger. "Be careful, Mrs. Morrison, and thank Jonas Brennan when you see him next. He may have just bought you more time than you realize." The walk home took 2 hours. The road wound through frozen fields, past abandoned homesteads, past cattle carcasses half buried in snow. Clara carried Rosie on her hip for the last mile. The girl had stopped shivering, which was worse than the shivering itself. Emmett trudged ahead, the grain sack balanced across his thin shoulders. He didn't slow down. He didn't look back. He was so much like Samuel, it made her chest ache. The cabin appeared through the trees. Small, rough-hewn smoke trickling from the chimney. The fire was still burning. Thank God. Clara pushed through the door. Heat hit her face like a blessing. "Emmett, put the grain by the stove. Rosie, baby, let's get you warm." She peeled off the girl's frozen coat, wrapped her in the blanket from the bed, settled her in the chair closest to the fire. Rosie's lips were blue. Her fingers were white. "Emmett, snow. Now." The boy didn't ask why. He grabbed a pot, ran outside, came back with it, packed full of clean snow from the drift by the porch. Clara set it on the stove. The snow began to melt. "We're going to warm your hands and feet slowly, Rosie. It's going to hurt. But you have to be brave. Can you do that?" Rosie nodded. Her teeth chattered. Clara dipped a cloth in the warming water, wrapped it gently around her daughter's fingers. Rosie whimpered. Tears streaked down her pale cheeks. "I know, baby. I know. But the feeling coming back means you're going to be okay." Emmett stood by the door watching. His jaw was tight. His eyes were too old for 10 years. "Mama." "Not now, Emmett." "Mama, I need to tell you something." "I said not now." "It's about Pa's papers." Clara's hands stilled on Rosie's fingers. "What papers?" Emmett reached into his coat, pulled out a folded document. The paper was yellowed, creased, spotted with what might have been water damage or tears. "I found this, in the barn, under the floorboards where Pa used to hide things." Clara took the paper, unfolded it slowly. Her breath stopped. It was a deed. Samuel's deed. Their deed. But the signature at the bottom wasn't Samuel's. The handwriting was different. The flourish on the M in Morrison was wrong. And beneath Samuel's forged name in crisp black ink, Wade Sterling, co-proprietor. "Emmett." Her voice came out strangled. "Where exactly did you find this?" "In the barn. There's a loose board by the hay bales. Pa showed me once, said it was our hiding spot. I went looking because—" He stopped, swallowed. "Because I thought maybe Pa left something that would help." Clara stared at the document. The room tilted around her. This wasn't possible. Samuel had handled the filing himself. She'd watched him sign it. Both their names together witnessed by Henry Doyle at the land office. But this deed had only Samuel's name, and Wade Sterling's. "Mama," Rosie's voice was small, "what's wrong?" Clara folded the paper carefully. Her hands shook, but her voice came out steady. "Nothing, baby. Nothing's wrong." But everything was wrong. Someone had forged her husband's signature. Someone had added their name to her land. And that someone was the most powerful man in the territory. She thought of Pruitt's warning. When Sterling gets interested in something, people tend to lose it. She thought of Samuel's death, the wagon accident, the frozen river, the way the sheriff had called it unfortunate timing and closed the investigation in 3 days. She thought of Jonas Brennan standing at the auction gate pressing $5 into her empty hand. I know what it looks like when a child goes hungry. What else did he know? The knock came at midnight. Clara sat bolt upright in bed. The fire had burned low embers glowing red in the darkness. Rosie slept beside her, breathing softly. Emmett was in the loft. The knock came again. 3 strikes. Hard. Deliberate. Clara reached under the mattress, pulled out Samuel's revolver. She'd never fired it. But she knew how to hold it. She crossed to the door. "Who's there?" "Mrs. Morrison." A man's voice. Unfamiliar. "I need to speak with you about your property." "It's midnight." "I'm aware of the hour, ma'am. I apologize for the intrusion. But Mr. Sterling sent me, and Mr. Sterling doesn't like to be kept waiting." Sterling. Clara's finger found the trigger. "Tell Mr. Sterling he can wait until morning, like civilized folk." A pause. Then, "Ma'am, I'm going to have to insist. And I'm going to have to refuse." She raised her voice loud enough to carry through the door. "I've got a revolver pointed at the door, .36 caliber. My husband taught me how to use it before he died. You want to test whether I learned—" Another pause. Longer this time. "Mr. Sterling will hear about this. I expect he will." Footsteps crunched through snow, retreating. Clara stayed at the door, revolver raised until the sound faded completely. Then she sank to the floor, back against the wood gun, heavy in her lap. "Mama." She looked up. Emmett stood at the top of the loft ladder, his face pale in the ember light. Go back to sleep, Emmett. Who was that? No one important. Mama, you're shaking. She looked down at her hands. The boy was right. She was shaking so hard, the revolver rattled against her thigh. Come here. Emmett climbed down the ladder, crossed the floor, sat beside her against the door. He was warm. He smelled like hay and wood smoke and something uniquely his. Are we in trouble? Clara pulled him close. His ribs pressed sharp against her arm. Yes. Bad trouble. The worst kind. He was quiet for a moment. Then, what are we going to do? Clara stared at the dying fire. At the grain sack by the stove. At Rosie's small form sleeping in the bed. We're going to fight. How? I don't know yet. She kissed the top of his head. He smelled like his father. Like home. Like everything she couldn't afford to lose. But we're Morrisons, and Morrisons don't quit. Pa didn't quit. No, he didn't. And he still died. The words hit her like a slap. She tightened her arms around him. Emmett, listen to me. Your father died fighting for this land. For us. For you, and Rosie, and me. And if I have to die fighting too, then that's what I'll do. But I'm not going down easy. And I'm not going down alone. He was quiet for a long time. Then, the big man, at the auction. He helped us. Yes. Maybe he'll help us again. Clara thought of Jonas Brennan's flat voice, his careful distance, the flicker of pain behind his eyes. Because I know what it looks like when a child goes hungry. Maybe, she said. Maybe he will. The fire crackled. Outside, a wolf howled. The wind picked up, rattling the shutters, whistling through the gaps in the chinking. Clara held her son in the darkness and waited for dawn. She didn't sleep. She didn't dream. She just held on. Morning came gray and cold. Clara was up before the children, coaxing the fire back to life, heating water for porridge. The grain Pruitt had sold her made a thin gruel, but it was hot and it was food, and that was more than they'd had in days. Emmett ate in silence. Rosie picked at her bowl, then asked for more. That's all there is, baby, for now. But I'm still hungry. I know. Dinner will be better. I promise. It was a lie. Dinner would be the same thin gruel. But Rosie didn't need to know that. The knock came mid-morning. Clara's hand went to the revolver still tucked in her apron pocket. Who is it? Jonas Brennan, ma'am. She froze. I brought supplies. Firewood mostly. Some salt pork if you'll take it. Clara looked at Emmett. He shrugged. She opened the door. Jonas Brennan stood on the porch, hat in hand. His wagon waited in the yard, loaded with split logs and covered crates. His horse stamped impatiently in the cold. Mr. Brennan. Mrs. Morrison. He nodded once. I don't mean to intrude, but I heard Sterling's man came by last night. Figured you might be short on supplies after the winter we've had. Clara's jaw tightened. You heard? Small town. People talk. And you decided to help. Again. I decided to make sure your children don't freeze to death before spring. His voice was flat, but his eyes met hers steadily. You can refuse if you want. But that firewood's already cut, and I've got nowhere else to take it. Emmett appeared at her elbow. Mama, let him help. Clara looked at her son, at his thin face, his cracked lips, his eyes that had seen too much too young. She stepped aside. Come in, Mr. Brennan. I'll make coffee. It was the first real conversation she'd had with anyone but her children in weeks. Jonas Brennan drank his coffee black. He sat at the table, too big for the small chair, his hat resting on his knee. The fire crackled. Rosie watched him from behind Clara's skirt, fascinated and frightened in equal measure. Sterling sent a man last night, Clara said. Midnight. Wanted to discuss my property. I know. You know a lot of things, Mr. Brennan, I know Sterling's been buying up land along the creek for 6 months. I know he's got railway investors coming through in April. And I know your property sits right where they want to build a switching station. He set down his cup. Your husband knew too. That's why he wouldn't sell. Clara's heart hammered. Samuel never mentioned. He wouldn't have. Not until he had proof. Jonas met her eyes. Your husband came to me 3 weeks before he died. Asked if I'd heard anything about the railway route. Said Sterling had been pressuring him, offering money, then threats. He was scared, Mrs. Morrison. Not for himself. For you. For the children. The room tilted. Clara gripped the table edge. Are you saying... I'm not saying anything. Not yet. Jonas stood, moved toward the door. But I've been asking questions, and some of the answers don't add up. Wait. Clara stepped toward him. The deed. There's a deed filed with the land office that lists Sterling as co-proprietor. But that's not what Samuel signed. I watched him sign it. Both our names together. Jonas stopped. His shoulders tensed. You've seen this deed. My son found it. Hidden in the barn. I think Samuel knew someone had forged it. I think he was gathering evidence. Jonas was silent for a long moment. Then, I need to see that document. Clara hesitated. Every instinct told her to protect it, to keep it hidden, to trust no one. But Jonas Brennan had given her money when she had nothing. Had brought her supplies when she was freezing. Had warned her about Sterling when he could have stayed silent. She crossed to the trunk by the bed, lifted the false bottom, pulled out the deed. Jonas took it carefully. His eyes moved over the paper line by line. This signature's wrong. His voice was quiet. Samuel Morrison had a distinctive hand. I've seen his contracts at the auction house. This isn't his writing. I know. And Sterling's name shouldn't be here. He wasn't part of the original filing. I know that too. Jonas looked up. Mrs. Morrison, if this deed is forged, and if we can prove it, Sterling loses everything. His land claims his railway deals, maybe even his freedom. He paused. But if he finds out you have this, if he knows you're looking for proof, he'll kill me, like he killed Samuel. The words hung in the air. Jonas didn't deny it. I'll help you, he said finally. I don't know what that's worth. I'm just an auctioneer with a bad reputation and a lot of enemies, but I've got resources Sterling doesn't know about, and I've got a reason to want to see him fall. What reason? Jonas's jaw tightened. The scar on his face stood out white against his skin. 5 years ago, my wife died. Margaret. She was pregnant. Sterling's bank called in our loan 3 days after she got sick. Said we'd missed a payment. We hadn't. But by the time I could prove it, we'd lost the house, the land, everything. She died in a boarding house room burning with fever because I couldn't afford a doctor. His voice cracked. Just once. Then steadied. Sterling didn't kill her. The sickness did. But he made sure we had nothing when it mattered. He made sure I couldn't save her. He met Clara's eyes. I've been waiting 5 years for a chance to take him down. This might be it. Clara stared at him, at the pain behind his eyes, at the rage he held so carefully in check. Why tell me this? Because you deserve to know who you're trusting. He handed back the deed. Keep this hidden. Don't tell anyone you have it, not even the people you think are friends. And you? I'll start asking questions, quietly. There's a woman in town, Martha Doyle, runs the general store. Her husband was a notary before he died. If anyone has records of the original filing, it's her. He moved toward the door, paused with his hand on the frame. Mrs. Morrison. Yes. Lock your door tonight, and keep that revolver close. He pulled his hat low and walked out into the cold. Clara watched him go. His wagon creaked down the frozen road, growing smaller and smaller until it disappeared over the ridge. Emmett appeared at her side. Mama, can we trust him? Clara thought of the money pressed into her hand, the firewood in the yard, the pain in Jonas Brennan's voice when he spoke his wife's name. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But right now he's all we've got." The wind picked up. Snow began to fall, and somewhere in town Wade Sterling was waiting. The snow fell harder by afternoon. Clara stood at the window watching the white erase Jonas Brennan's wagon tracks. Within an hour, it would look like he'd never come at all. "Mama!" Emmett's voice came from behind her. "Someone's coming." Clara's hand went to the revolver in her apron. She squinted through the frost-covered glass. A woman. Alone. Walking through the drifts with a basket over her arm. Martha Doyle. Clara opened the door before the woman reached the porch. "Mrs. Morrison?" Martha stamped snow from her boots. Her face was red from cold, her breath coming in white puffs. "Jonas Brennan came to my shop this morning. Said you needed help. He moves fast. He's been waiting 5 years for a chance to move at all." Martha stepped inside without being invited. Her eyes swept the cabin, taking in the thin children, the meager fire, the empty shelves. "Lord have mercy. It's worse than I thought. We're managing. You're starving." Martha set her basket on the table. "I brought bread, some preserved apples, a bit of bacon." She pulled back the cloth. The smell hit Clara like a punch. Rosie appeared instantly, eyes wide. "Can I have some, Mama? Please?" Clara's throat closed. She nodded. Martha cut a thick slice of bread, spread it with apple preserves, handed it to the girl. Rosie bit into it like she'd never tasted food before. "Thank you," Clara managed. "Don't thank me yet." Martha pulled out a chair, sat down heavily. "Jonas told me about the deed, the forged one. He told you everything. He told me enough." Martha's eyes were sharp. "My husband Henry was the notary who witnessed your original filing, February 1884. I remember because Henry came home that night talking about Samuel Morrison and his pretty wife. Said you both signed together. Said Samuel insisted your maiden name be included." Clara's heart hammered. "Then you know the filed deed is wrong." "I know what Henry told me. But knowing and proving are different animals." Martha leaned forward. "Henry kept copies. Every deed, every contract, every signature he ever witnessed. Said you couldn't trust men like Wade Sterling with ink and paper. Where are these copies?" "That's the problem. After Henry died, Sterling's men came to the shop. Said they needed to review some documents for a territorial audit. They took 3 boxes of Henry's records." Martha's jaw tightened. "But they didn't find everything." Clara's breath caught. "There's more." Henry was paranoid. Kept duplicates in a hidden safe behind the back wall of the shop. Sterling's men searched for an hour. Never found it. Martha smiled thin and fierce. "I've got copies of every deed Henry witnessed in 1884, including yours." The room tilted. Clara gripped the table edge. "You have proof." "I have evidence. Whether it's enough proof depends on the judge." Martha stood. "Come to my shop tomorrow, after dark. We'll go through Henry's papers together." "Why are you helping me?" Martha paused at the door. Her face softened. "Because Sterling destroyed my husband. Not directly. But he made Henry's last years miserable. Threatened him, pressured him, tried to buy him off. Henry refused to change his records and Sterling never forgave him for it." She pulled her shawl tight. "Henry died with a clear conscience. But I've been waiting 3 years for a chance to make Sterling pay. This is it." She opened the door. Cold wind rushed in. "Tomorrow night, Mrs. Morrison. And don't tell anyone where you're going. Not even your children." The door closed. Footsteps crunched through snow, fading into silence. Emmett appeared at Clara's elbow. "I heard everything. You were supposed to be in the loft." "I was supposed to be a lot of things." His voice was flat. Too flat for a 10-year-old. "Are we going to win, Mama?" Clara looked at her son. At his hollow cheeks, his cracked lips, his eyes that had aged a decade in 8 months. I don't know, but we're going to fight. Pa would want us to fight. Yes, he would. Emmett nodded once, then climbed back to the loft without another word. Clara stood alone in the cabin, the smell of bread and bacon filling the air, her husband's forged signature burning in her mind. Tomorrow night. Everything would change tomorrow night. The next day crawled. Clara kept the children close, fed them the last of Martha's bread, listened to the wind howl against the cabin walls. She cleaned Samuel's revolver twice, checked the ammunition 3 times. By sunset, her nerves were raw. Emmett. The boy looked up from the fire. I have to go into town tonight. I need you to watch Rosie. Why can't we come? Because it's not safe. It's not safe here either. Clara crossed to him, knelt so their eyes were level. Listen to me. If anyone comes to this door, anyone at all, you don't answer. You take Rosie up to the loft, you pull the ladder up after you, and you stay quiet until morning. Understand? Emmett's jaw tightened. What if they try to break in? Clara pressed the revolver into his hands. Then you use this. His eyes widened. Mama. You know how to shoot. Your father taught you. Point at the center of the chest squeeze, don't pull and don't hesitate. She closed his fingers around the grip. Can you do that? He was silent for a long moment. Then, yes, ma'am. Good boy. She kissed his forehead. I'll be back before midnight. Lock the door behind me. The walk to town took an hour. Clara moved fast, staying off the main road, cutting through the trees where the snow was deeper, but the shadows were darker. Her boots crunched through ice. Her breath fogged in the moonlight. Martha's shop sat at the end of Main Street, dark, except for a single lamp burning in the back window. Clara slipped through the alley, knocked 3 times on the rear door. It opened immediately. You came. Martha stepped aside. Quickly, before someone sees. The back room smelled of dust and old paper. Boxes lined the walls. A small safe sat in the corner door, open papers spilling out. I've been looking all day. Martha crossed to the safe, pulled out a leather folder. Found it an hour ago. The original Caldwell filing. February 12th, 1884. Clara's hands trembled as she took the folder. Inside was a single document. Yellowed, creased, but unmistakable. 2 signatures at the bottom. Samuel James Morrison. Clara Jane Whitfield Morrison. Her maiden name, clear as day, and at the bottom a notary stamp. Henry Doyle Witness. February 12th, 1884. No Sterling. No co-proprietor clause. Just her and Samuel together the way it was supposed to be. This is it. Clara's voice cracked. This proves the filed deed is forged. It proves the filed deed doesn't match the original. That's not quite the same thing. Martha lit another lamp. Sterling will claim clerical error. Say the land office made a mistake. Say your husband amended the deed after the original filing. But he didn't. I know he didn't. You know he didn't. But proving it requires more than one document. Martha pulled out a second folder. Which is why I kept looking. She spread papers across the table. Letters, receipts, a small leather journal. Henry's personal diary. He wrote everything down, including this. She opened the journal to a marked page. March 1884. 1 month after your deed was filed. Clara leaned close. The handwriting was cramped, difficult to read in the dim lamplight. Sterling came today. Demanded I amend the Morrison deed. Said he'd reached an agreement with Samuel that the property should list him as co-proprietor. I refused. Told him the deed was filed and sealed, that any changes would require both Morrison signatures. He threatened me. Said he'd destroy my business, ruin my reputation. I told him to leave. He'll be back. Men like Sterling always come back. Clara's breath stopped. He tried to change the deed a month after we filed it. And Henry refused. Martha's voice was hard. But someone didn't refuse. Someone at the land office maybe. Or maybe Sterling just forged the amendment himself. Either way, the document you found in your barn isn't the original. It's a fake. Can we prove that? We can prove the signatures don't match. We can prove Henry refused to amend the deed. We can prove Sterling had motive. Martha closed the journal. Whether that's enough depends on the judge. Judge Pierce. He arrives next month for circuit court. I know, and so does Sterling. Martha moved to the window, peered through the curtain. He's been preparing for this, Mrs. Morrison. He knows someone might challenge the deed eventually. He's got lawyers, witnesses, money. Everything you don't have. I have the truth. The truth doesn't always win. Martha turned back. But sometimes it does, especially when powerful men get careless. Clara gathered the papers, tucked them inside her coat. I need to get home. Wait! Martha caught her arm. There's something else. Something I didn't want to say until I was sure. Clara's stomach dropped. What? Martha's face was pale in the lamplight. 3 weeks before your husband died, he came to see me. Late at night like you. He was scared, Mrs. Morrison. I'd never seen Samuel scared before, but that night he was terrified. What did he want? He wanted to know if Henry had kept copies of the original deed. I told him yes. He asked me to hide them somewhere Sterling would never find them. Said if anything happened to him, I should give them to you. Clara's legs weakened. She gripped the table. He knew. He knew Sterling was coming for him. He knew the deed had been forged, and he knew he might not survive long enough to prove it. Martha's eyes glistened. He made me promise, Mrs. Morrison. Made me swear on Henry's grave that I'd protect those papers until you were ready to fight. Why didn't you come to me sooner? Because you weren't ready. You were grieving, starving, barely surviving. If I'd given you these papers in the fall, Sterling would have found out. He'd have destroyed you before you had a chance. Martha squeezed her arm. But you're ready now. I can see it in your eyes. Samuel could see it too. That's why he trusted me to wait. Clara's vision blurred. She blinked back tears. Thank you. Don't thank me. Win. Martha released her arm. Now go, before someone notices the light. Clara slipped out the back door. The cold hit her like a wall. She pulled her coat tight, tucked the papers against her chest, and ran. The road stretched long and empty. Moonlight painted the snow silver. Clara's breath came in gasps. Her boots slipped on ice. She didn't slow down. Halfway home, she heard hooves. She dove off the road, pressed herself against a tree. Her heart hammered. Her hand went to her waist, but the revolver was with Emmett. The rider appeared over the ridge, a single horse moving fast. The rider sat tall in the saddle shoulders, broad hat pulled low. Jonas Brennan. Clara stepped out of the shadows. Mr. Brennan? He reined in hard. The horse snorted, stamped. Mrs. Morrison, what are you doing out here alone? I could ask you the same thing. He swung down from the saddle. His face was grim in the moonlight. Sterling knows. Clara's blood went cold. Knows what? Knows you have the forged deed. Knows you've been asking questions. One of his men saw you leave Martha's shop. Jonas grabbed her arm. You need to get home, now. The children? I sent someone to watch the cabin. A man I trust. They're safe for now. He boosted her onto his horse. Ride. Don't stop for anything. What about you? I'll follow on foot. If Sterling's men are watching the road, they'll come after me, not you. Jonas. Go. His voice cracked like a whip. Now. Clara kicked the horse into a gallop. The wind tore at her face. The papers pressed against her chest, sharp-edged and precious. Behind her, Jonas Brennan disappeared into the darkness. She didn't look back. The cabin was dark when she arrived. Clara's heart stopped. She leaped from the horse, ran to the door, pounded with both fists. Emmett Rosie, open the door. Silence. Emmett. A scraping sound. The door cracked open. Emmett's face appeared pale and terrified, the revolver shaking in his hands. Mama! His voice broke. There was a man. He came to the door. Said he was a friend. but he didn't look friendly. Clara pushed inside, slammed the door through the bolt. "Where's Rosie?" "In the loft. I made her hide." Emmett's whole body trembled. "I did what you said, Mama. I didn't open the door. I didn't let him in." Clara pulled him close. His small body shook against hers. "You did good. You did so good." "But he said he'd be back. He said Mr. Sterling wants to talk to you." Emmett's voice dropped to a whisper. "He said if you don't sell the land, something bad will happen." Clara's arms tightened around her son. "Nothing bad is going to happen." "How do you know?" She didn't answer. Because she didn't know. Because Sterling had already killed Samuel. Because the only thing standing between her children and disaster was a stack of old papers and the word of a broken auctioneer. "Mama." "Yes, baby. I'm scared." Clara closed her eyes, felt the weight of the papers against her chest, felt the weight of her children's lives pressing down on her shoulders. "I know. I'm scared too." She released him, held him at arm's length. But scared doesn't mean we stop fighting. Scared means we fight harder. A knock at the door. Clara's hand flew to the revolver. Emmett scrambled behind her. "Mrs. Morrison." Jonas Brennan's voice. "It's me. Open up." She unbolted the door. Jonas stepped inside, snow-dusting his shoulders, his face grim. "Sterling's men are circling the property. 2 riders, maybe 3. They're not attacking yet, just watching." "Watching for what?" "For you to make a mistake." Jonas moved to the window, peered through the frost. "He knows you have evidence. He doesn't know how much. He's waiting to see what you do next." "What should I do?" Jonas turned to face her. In the firelight, his eyes were dark, unreadable. "You have 2 choices. Run or fight." He paused. "If you run, Sterling wins. He takes the land files, whatever paperwork he needs, and no one questions it. Your husband's death becomes just another frontier accident. Your children grow up somewhere else, always wondering what happened to their home." Clara's jaw tightened. "And if I fight?" "If you fight, you force a public hearing. Judge Pierce arrives in 4 weeks. You present your evidence, demand an investigation, and let the whole territory watch Sterling squirm. And if I lose?" Jonas was silent for a long moment. "If you lose, Sterling takes everything anyway. But at least you went down swinging." Clara looked at her children. Emmett stood rigid by the fire, trying so hard to be brave. Rosie peered down from the loft, her small face pale and frightened. She thought of Samuel, of his hands on the deed, his voice in her ear, his promise that this land would be their children's future. She thought of the forged signature, the dead notary, the midnight threats. She thought of running, of disappearing into the territories, starting over somewhere Sterling couldn't reach. But she knew deep in her bones that running wouldn't save them. Men like Sterling didn't stop. They followed. They found. They finished. The only way out was through. "I'll fight." Jonas nodded once. Something flickered in his eyes. Relief, maybe, or respect. "Then we start tomorrow. Martha has the documents. I have witnesses who will testify about Sterling's threats, his business dealings, his pattern of buying land from people who suddenly had accidents." He moved toward the door. "It won't be easy. Sterling has money power, half the territory in his pocket. But he's also got enemies. People he's cheated, families he's destroyed. They're just waiting for someone brave enough to stand up first. And you think I'm that someone?" Jonas paused with his hand on the door. "I think your husband believed you were. That's why he trusted Martha with those papers. That's why he made her wait until you were ready." He met her eyes. "Samuel Morrison knew what he was doing, Mrs. Morrison. He bet everything on you. Don't let him down." He opened the door. Cold wind rushed in. "Lock up. Stay inside. I'll be back at dawn." "Jonas." He stopped. "Thank you. For everything." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Don't thank me yet. We haven't won anything." The door closed. His footsteps faded into the night. Clara stood alone in the cabin, her children watching the fire burning low, the weight of her husband's faith pressing down on her chest. 4 weeks until the judge arrived. 4 weeks to gather evidence, find witnesses, build a case against the most powerful man in the territory. 4 weeks to fight for everything she had left. She looked at Emmett, at Rosie, at the walls Samuel had built with his own hands. "We're going to win," she said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a hope. It was a promise. 3 days passed. Jonas came every morning, stayed until dark. He chopped wood, mended fences, brought news from town. Sterling had filed a motion to accelerate the foreclosure. The hearing was scheduled for March 15th, 2 weeks away. Judge Pierce would preside. "He's trying to rush you," Jonas said. "Force you to present evidence before you're ready." "Then I'll be ready." "You'll need witnesses, people willing to stand up in public and call Wade Sterling a liar." "Who would do that?" "More people than you think." Jonas pulled a folded paper from his coat. "I've been making a list. Farmers Sterling cheated out of land. Widows whose husbands died in convenient accidents. Merchants he's threatened, clerks he's bribed." He spread the paper on the table. 17 names. 12 have agreed to testify if you go first. Clara stared at the list. 17 families. 12 willing to risk everything. "Why would they trust me?" "Because you're the first person in 5 years who hasn't backed down." Jonas's voice was steady. "Sterling's power comes from fear. People are afraid to speak because they think they're alone. But when one person stands up, others follow. That's what you're doing, Mrs. Morrison. You're showing them they're not alone." The door burst open. Emmett stumbled in, gasping for breath, snow covering his coat. "Mama! Men! Coming up the road! 6 of them!" Jonas was at the window in 3 strides. "Sterling's enforcers. I recognize the one in front. Name's Colt Reeves. Does Sterling's dirty work." Clara's hand went to the revolver. "What do we do?" "You stay inside. Keep the children in the loft." Jonas reached for his rifle. "I'll handle this." "Jonas?" "Mrs. Morrison." His voice was calm, too calm. "If they wanted to kill you, they'd have done it already. This is intimidation. Sterling wants you scared, not dead." "Then why are you bringing a rifle?" "Because scared and dead are closer than you think." He stepped onto the porch. Clara watched through the window, revolver in hand, heart pounding. The riders stopped 30 feet from the cabin. 6 men. Heavy coats, hard faces, rifles across their saddles. The one in front, Colt Reeves, tipped his hat. "Brennan, didn't expect to find you here." "Then you weren't paying attention." Reeves smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Sterling sends his regards. Says he's disappointed Mrs. Morrison hasn't accepted his generous offer." "The offer to steal her land." "The offer to buy it. Fair price. Legal transaction." Reeves shifted in his saddle. "Mr. Sterling is a reasonable man. He understands Mrs. Morrison is grieving. He's willing to wait a few more days for her answer." "And if she doesn't answer?" Reeves's smile widened. "Then things might get less reasonable." Jonas raised his rifle. The click of the hammer was loud in the frozen air. "Deliver your message and leave." Reeves's eyes went flat. "You're making a mistake, Brennan. Sterling doesn't forget, and he doesn't forgive." "Neither do I." The silence stretched. Clara held her breath. Her finger tightened on the revolver trigger. Reeves spat into the snow. "You've got until Sunday, Mrs. Morrison." He raised his voice so she could hear through the window. "After that, Mr. Sterling stops being reasonable." He wheeled his horse around. The other riders followed. 6 sets of hooves thundering back down the road, disappearing into the white. Jonas lowered his rifle. His hands were steady, but Clara could see the tension in his shoulders. "They'll be back," he said. "I know. And next time, they won't just talk." "I know that too." She opened the door. The cold hit her face. She didn't flinch. "Then we'd better be ready." Jonas turned to look at her. Something shifted in his expression. Something almost like hope. "Yes, ma'am. We'd better." The wind picked up. Snow swirled across the yard, and somewhere in the distance, Wade Sterling was counting down the days. Sunday was coming. Clara would be ready. Sunday came with a silence that felt like death. Clara woke before dawn, the revolver under her pillow, her children's breathing soft in the darkness. She lay still, listening. No hooves, no voices, just the wind against the cabin walls. Too quiet. She rose, crossed to the window, peered through the frost. Nothing. The yard was empty. The road was clear. Her stomach twisted. "Mama." Emmett's voice came from the loft. "Go back to sleep." "I can't sleep. I keep thinking about Sunday." "It is Sunday." "I know." Clara turned from the window. Her son's face appeared over the loft edge, pale and drawn. "What if they come? Then we'll be ready. What if we're not?" Clara climbed the ladder, sat beside him on the narrow mattress. Rosie slept between them, her small body curled tight, thumb in her mouth. "Emmett, look at me." He turned. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. "Whatever happens today, I need you to remember something. Your father built this cabin with his own hands. He cleared this land, planted these fields, dug that well. He did it for you, for Rosie, for our family." She took his face in her hands. "No one is going to take that away. Not Sterling. Not his men. Not anyone. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good." She kissed his forehead. "Now get dressed. We've got work to do." The morning passed in tense silence. Clara fed the children, checked the ammunition, paced the cabin floor. Jonas had promised to come at noon. The clock on the mantel showed 11. 59 minutes. She could feel every one of them. At 11:30, the sound of hooves broke the silence. Clara grabbed the revolver, pushed the children toward the loft. "Emmett, take Rosie, now!" "But Mama, now!" He scrambled up the ladder, pulling his sister behind him. Clara positioned herself by the window gun, raised, heart hammering. The rider came over the ridge. One horse, one rider, moving fast. Jonas. Clara lowered the revolver, opened the door. He swung down from the saddle before the horse fully stopped. His face was grim. "Sterling's made his move." "What happened?" "He filed an emergency petition this morning. Claimed you're mentally unstable, unfit to manage property. He's asking the judge to appoint a conservator." Jonas's jaw tightened. "He wants the court to take control of your land before the hearing even starts." Clara's legs weakened. She gripped the doorframe. "Can he do that?" "He can try. Judge Pierce hasn't ruled yet. But Sterling's got 3 witnesses lined up to testify you've been acting erratically, making wild accusations, threatening people." "That's a lie." "I know it's a lie. You know it's a lie. But Sterling's witnesses will say whatever he pays them to say." Clara's hands shook. She forced them still. "What do we do?" "We fight back. Martha's already on her way to the judge with Henry's records. I've got 4 of our witnesses ready to counter-testify." Jonas stepped closer. "But Clara, you need to understand something. This isn't just about land anymore. Sterling's trying to destroy you. Your reputation, your credibility, your ability to fight back. If he convinces the judge you're unstable, everything else falls apart." "Then I'll prove I'm not." "How?" Clara thought of the papers hidden in the trunk, of Martha's testimony, of the 17 names on Jonas's list. "By standing up in public and telling the truth. All of it. About Samuel's death. About the forged deed. About Sterling's threats." She met Jonas's eyes. "If he wants a war, I'll give him one." Jonas was silent for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression, something that looked almost like pride. "There's a town meeting tonight, 7 o'clock at the church. Sterling called it. Says he wants to address concerns about the Morrison property dispute. He's trying to turn the town against me before the hearing." "Yes." Clara's jaw set. "Then I'll be there." Clara. I said I'll be there. She grabbed her coat from the hook. If Sterling wants to destroy me in public, he can do it to my face, and I can do the same to him. The church was packed by 6:30. Clara stood outside in the cold, watching through the window as families filed in. Farmers in muddy boots, women in worn shawls, children pressed against their mothers' skirts. Her people, her neighbors, the same people who'd avoided her eyes at the market, whispered behind her back, watched her children go hungry without lifting a finger. She hated them, and she needed them. You ready? Jonas stood beside her rifle slung across his back. No. Good. Means you're thinking clearly. She almost laughed. Almost. Martha appeared from the side street, a leather satchel clutched to her chest. Her face was pale but determined. The judge received Henry's records. He's reviewing them tonight. She fell into step beside Clara. But Sterling's already inside. He's been talking for 20 minutes, making his case. What's he saying? That you're dangerous, delusional, that you've been making accusations without evidence. Martha's voice dropped. He's got Mrs. Crane in there testifying that you threatened her at the market. I know, but she's scared. They're all scared. Martha touched her arm. That's what you have to change tonight, Clara. Not the facts, the fear. Clara looked at the church doors. Lamplight spilled through the cracks. Voices murmured inside. She thought of Samuel, of his voice in her ear the night before he died. They're going to try to break you, Clara. Don't let them. She pushed through the doors. The room went silent. 200 faces turned toward her, some hostile, some curious, most just tired and afraid. Wade Sterling stood at the front of the church behind the pulpit. His suit was pressed, his hair oiled, his expression one of practiced concern. Mrs. Morrison. His voice carried across the room. We were just discussing your situation. I heard. She walked down the center aisle. Every step felt like a mile. She could feel the eyes on her, the judgment, the doubt. Jonas followed 3 steps behind. Martha hung back near the door. Clara stopped 10 feet from the pulpit. You've been telling these people I'm dangerous. I've been expressing concern for your well-being. Sterling's smile was thin. You've suffered a terrible loss, Mrs. Morrison. Your husband's death, the financial strain, the isolation. It's natural that your judgment might be affected. My judgment is fine. Is it? Sterling turned to the crowd. This woman has accused me of forgery, of fraud, of murder. He let the word hang in the air. Without a shred of evidence, without a single witness, just the desperate ravings of a grieving widow. Clara's hands curled into fists. I have evidence. Do you? Sterling's eyes gleamed. Then why haven't you presented it? Why haven't you gone to the sheriff, filed charges, demanded an investigation? Because the sheriff works for you. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Sterling's smile didn't waver. And now she accuses our own sheriff of corruption. Tell me, Mrs. Morrison, is there anyone in this town you don't suspect of conspiracy? Clara's throat burned. She could feel the tide turning against her, could see the doubt spreading across face after face. She thought of Emmett, of Rosie, of the cabin Samuel built with his own hands. She thought of the forged deed, the dead notary, the midnight threats. My husband knew you were trying to steal our land. The room went still. 3 weeks before he died, he came to Martha Doyle, asked her to hide copies of our original deed, said if anything happened to him, she should give them to me when I was ready to fight. Clara's voice shook, but she didn't stop. He knew Sterling. He knew you'd forged his signature. He knew you'd come for the property. And he knew you might kill him to get it. Sterling's smile vanished. That's a serious accusation, Mrs. Morrison. It's the truth. It's slander. His voice hardened. And I won't stand here and be defamed by a woman who can't accept that her husband's death was an accident. It wasn't an accident. The words exploded from her chest. Samuel's wagon didn't just overturn. The axle was cut. The sheriff called it wear and tear. But I saw the marks, Sterling. Clean cuts. Deliberate. Tears streamed down her face. You murdered my husband, and now you're trying to steal everything he left behind. The room erupted. Voices rose. People stood. Someone was shouting. Someone else was crying. Sterling raised his hands. Order. Please everyone, let's remain calm. But the room wouldn't calm. The fear had cracked. Something else was pushing through. Doubt. She's telling the truth. The voice came from the back of the room. Clara turned. A man stood in the rear doorway. Weathered face, patched coat. A farmer she recognized from the market. Name's Everett Wade. Sterling bought my land 2 years ago. Said I'd defaulted on payments. I hadn't. But by the time I could prove it, the deed was filed in his name. The man stepped forward. My brother helped me check the records at the land office. The signature on the transfer wasn't mine. It was forged, same as hers. Sterling's face went pale. Mr. Wade, this is hardly the time. Then when is the time? Another voice, a woman this time, rising from the third pew. My husband died in a barn fire 6 months after he refused to sell to you. Sheriff called it an accident, but the doors were barred from the outside. Mrs. Patterson, please. No. The woman's voice cracked. I've been quiet for 3 years. 3 years of watching you take everything, threaten, everyone, destroy anyone who stood in your way. I'm done being quiet. More voices rose, more accusations, more stories. A man whose cattle were poisoned after he rejected Sterling's offer. A widow whose home burned down the week after her husband's death. A merchant whose shop was vandalized until he agreed to sell. One by one they stood. One by one they spoke. Sterling's face had gone gray. His hands gripped the pulpit-edge knuckles white. This is a witch hunt. You're all being manipulated by a disturbed woman who— Enough! The voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Judge Harlan Pierce stood in the church doorway, tall, silver-haired, eyes cold as mountain ice. The room went silent. I've been listening from outside. The judge walked down the center aisle, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. And I've been reading the documents Mrs. Doyle provided this afternoon. He stopped in front of Sterling. Henry Doyle was a careful man, Mr. Sterling. He kept copies of everything, including a diary entry from March 1884 describing your attempt to coerce him into amending the Morrison deed. Sterling's mouth opened, closed. He also kept a copy of the original deed, 2 signatures, Samuel Morrison and Clara Morrison. No co-proprietor clause, no mention of your name. The judge's voice was ice. The deed filed with the land office is a forgery, Mr. Sterling, and I intend to prove it. Sterling's composure cracked. This is ridiculous. A dead man's diary isn't evidence. Those documents could have been fabricated. Then you'll have no objection to a full investigation. The judge turned to the crowd. I'm postponing all foreclosure proceedings pending a review of land records at the territorial office. Anyone who believes they've been defrauded by Mr. Sterling is invited to submit testimony. The room buzzed. Hope. Relief. Something that had been dead for years, flickering back to life. Sterling stepped back from the pulpit. You're making a mistake, Judge. A serious mistake. The only mistake I see is the one you made when you thought no one would stand up to you. Pierce's eyes were merciless. The hearing is scheduled for Friday. Be there, with whatever explanation you have for why your name appears on a dozen deeds that the original owners say they never signed. Sterling's face twisted. For a moment, Clara saw the man beneath the mask. Not the smooth banker, not the concerned citizen. Just a predator backed into a corner. Dangerous. Desperate. Then, the mask slammed back into place. I'll see you Friday, Judge. Sterling's voice was calm. Too calm. And we'll see who the court believes. He walked down the aisle past Clara, past Jonas, past the crowd of people who'd finally found the courage to speak. At the door, he paused. "Mrs. Morrison." Clara turned. "This isn't over." He disappeared into the night. The crowd dispersed slowly. People Clara hadn't spoken to in months stopped to shake her hand, squeeze her shoulder, whisper words of support. "We're with you." "Should have spoken up sooner." "Your husband would be proud." Each word was a coal against her chest, warming, burning. Jonas found her near the pulpit, alone, staring at nothing. "You did it." "Did I?" Her voice was hollow. "Sterling's still free. The hearing's still coming. Nothing's changed." "Everything's changed." Jonas stepped closer. "You broke the fear, Clara. You showed them they weren't alone. That's more than anyone's done in 5 years. And if it's not enough, then we keep fighting." She looked at him. At the scar on his jaw, the gray at his temples, the steady calm in his eyes. "Why are you doing this, really?" Jonas was quiet for a long moment. "Because I couldn't save Margaret. I couldn't save our baby. I couldn't save the home we built together." His voice roughened. "But maybe I can help save yours. Maybe that's worth something." Clara's throat closed. "It's worth everything." They stood in silence. The church emptied around them. Martha gathered her papers. The lamp flames flickered low. Finally, Jonas spoke. "Friday's 4 days away. Sterling will use every one of them. He'll threaten witnesses, destroy evidence, maybe try something worse." "I know." "You need to be ready." "I will be." Jonas nodded, turned toward the door, paused. "Clara." "Yes. Whatever happens Friday, whatever the judge decides, you've already won something tonight." "What's that?" He looked back at her, and for the first time she saw something in his eyes that wasn't grief or guilt or careful distance. "You've won me." He walked out into the cold. Clara stood alone in the empty church, her heart pounding, her mind racing, Sterling's threat echoing in her ears. This isn't over. No, it wasn't. But for the first time since Samuel died, she believed it might be someday. The next 3 days were a blur. Witnesses came to the cabin, 1 each morning, 2 each afternoon. They sat at Clara's table, drank her coffee, told their stories. The farmer whose land was stolen. The widow whose husband died in a suspicious fire. The merchant whose signature was forged. Clara wrote everything down. Names, dates, details. Martha organized the documents. Jonas coordinated the witnesses. Together they built a case brick by brick. On Wednesday, Colt Reeves returned. Clara was alone in the yard splitting wood when he rode up. 6 men behind him, same as before. She didn't reach for the revolver. "Mrs. Morrison." "Mr. Reeves." He leaned forward in his saddle. "Mr. Sterling has reconsidered his position. He's prepared to offer you $10,000 for the property. Cash. Today." Clara's axe bit into the wood. She didn't look up. "No." "Mrs. Morrison, that's more money than you'll see in your lifetime." "I said no." Reeves's smile faded. "Mr. Sterling also wanted me to remind you that accidents happen in winter. Fires start. People fall through ice. Children wander off and don't come back." Clara's blood went cold. She straightened, met his eyes. "If Sterling touches my children, I'll kill him myself." Reeves's expression flickered, something that might have been respect. "Bold words, ma'am." "Not words. A promise." The silence stretched. Reeves's horse stamped impatiently. Finally, he tipped his hat. "See you Friday, Mrs. Morrison." He wheeled his horse around. The riders followed, 6 sets of hooves thundering away. Clara stood in the yard, axe in hand, heart racing. Children wander off and don't come back. She ran for the cabin. "Emmett, Rosie." The door flew open. Both children appeared, faces alarmed. "Mama, what's wrong?" Clara pulled them close, held them tight, felt their hearts beating against her chest. "Nothing. Nothing's wrong." "Then why are you crying?" She hadn't realized she was. "Because I love you." Because no matter what happens, no matter what anyone says or does, I'm going to keep you safe." She pulled back, looked at their faces. "Both of you. Forever. I promise." Emmett's jaw tightened. He looked so much like Samuel, it broke her heart. "We know, Mama. We know." Thursday night, Clara couldn't sleep. She sat by the fire, the documents spread across the table, the revolver in her lap. Tomorrow would decide everything. Tomorrow, Judge Pierce would hear the evidence. Tomorrow, Sterling would face the truth. Or tomorrow, Sterling would win. She didn't know which. A knock at the door. Clara's hand tightened on the revolver. "Who's there?" "Jonas." She opened the door. He stood on the porch, hat in hand, snow dusting his shoulders. "I saw your lamp burning. Figured you couldn't sleep either." "Come in." He stepped inside, took his usual chair by the fire. Didn't speak. Clara sat across from him. The silence stretched comfortable for once. "Are we going to win?" she finally asked. "I don't know." "That's not very reassuring." "It's honest." Jonas leaned forward. "Sterling's got money, lawyers, years of practice covering his tracks. We've got a dead man's diary, some forged signatures, and the testimony of people he's already destroyed once." "Then why are you still here?" Jonas looked at her, really looked. "Because sometimes honest people win. Because sometimes the truth matters more than money. Because sometimes—" He stopped, swallowed. "Because sometimes you meet someone worth fighting for." Clara's heart stuttered. "Jonas?" "I'm not asking for anything." His voice was rough. "I know it's too soon. I know you're still grieving. I know I'm just a broken-down auctioneer with a bad reputation and too many ghosts." He paused. "But when this is over, whatever happens, I want you to know something." "What?" "I'd do it all again. Every minute. Every risk. Every sleepless night." His eyes held hers. "For you." Clara's throat closed. Tears burned her eyes. "Why?" "Because you're the bravest person I've ever met. Because you stood up when everyone else stayed down. Because when I look at you, I see something I thought I'd lost forever." "What's that?" "Hope." The fire crackled. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, something shifted. Something that had been frozen for 8 months began to thaw. Clara reached across the space between them. Took his hand. "Thank you." "For what?" "For believing in me, when no one else did." Jonas's fingers tightened around hers. "Always." They sat like that until dawn. Two broken people holding on to each other in the darkness, waiting for the light. Friday dawned cold and gray. Clara dressed in her best black wool, the dress she'd worn to Samuel's funeral. Her hands shook as she buttoned the collar. "Mama." Emmett stood in the doorway, already dressed, his face pale. "It's time." She looked at her son, 10 years old, trying so hard to be a man. "Where's Rosie?" "Martha came early, took her to the shop, said it's safer there." Clara nodded. One less thing to worry about. Jonas's wagon appeared in the yard at 8. Clara climbed up beside him without speaking. Emmett sat in the back, rigid, watching the road behind them. The ride to town took forever. And no time at all. Main Street was packed. Wagons lined both sides. Horses stamped at hitching posts. People streamed toward the courthouse, breath-fogging, voices low. Clara had never seen so many people in Elkhorn. "Word spread," Jonas said quietly. "Folks came from 3 counties to watch Sterling fall. Or watch me fail. That too." They climbed down from the wagon. The crowd parted. Eyes followed Clara as she walked toward the courthouse steps. Some hostile, some curious. Most just waiting to see what would happen. Judge Pierce stood at the top of the steps, flanked by 2 territorial marshals. "Mrs. Morrison." His voice carried across the crowd. Are you prepared to present your case? Yes, Your Honor. Then let's begin. The courthouse was too small for the crowd. People stood along the walls packed into the aisles spilled out through the open doors. The air was thick with body heat and tension. Clara took her seat at the front. Jonas sat behind her. Martha beside him, the leather satchel clutched to her chest. Sterling sat across the aisle flanked by two lawyers in expensive suits. His face was calm, composed. But Clara saw the vein pulsing at his temple. He was afraid. Good. Judge Pierce banged his gavel. This hearing will come to order. The matter before us is a dispute of property ownership regarding the Morrison Homestead Section 12, Township 4 North. Mrs. Morrison claims the deed filed with the Territorial Land Office is fraudulent. Mr. Sterling claims it is legitimate. He looked at Clara. Mrs. Morrison, present your evidence. Clara stood. Her legs trembled. She forced them steady. Your Honor, on February 12, 1884, my husband Samuel Morrison and I signed a deed for our property. Both our names, both our signatures. Witnessed by Henry Doyle, Notary Public. She nodded to Martha. Martha opened her satchel, withdrew the original deed, carried it to the judge. This is the original document. 2 signatures. Samuel James Morrison and Clara Jane Whitfield Morrison. No co-proprietor. No mention of Wade Sterling. Pierce examined the document. His face was unreadable. Continue. 3 months later, in March 1884, Mr. Sterling approached Henry Doyle. He demanded that Henry amend the deed to add his name as co-proprietor. Henry refused. Clara's voice strengthened. Henry documented this encounter in his personal diary. Mrs. Doyle has provided that diary as evidence. Martha produced the leather journal, handed it to the judge. Pierce read the marked passage. His jaw tightened. Mr. Sterling, do you deny this encounter occurred? Sterling rose slowly. His smile was thin. Your Honor, Henry Doyle was a troubled man. His memory was unreliable. His record-keeping was sloppy. Whatever he may have written in his personal diary is hardly admissible as evidence. He was a licensed notary public for 15 years. Notaries make mistakes. Records get confused. Sterling's voice was smooth, practiced. The deed filed with the land office bears Samuel Morrison's signature and mine, witnessed and registered properly. Mrs. Morrison's claims are based on grief, not fact. Clara's hands curled into fists. That signature is forged. Prove it. The word hung in the air. Clara reached into her pocket, pulled out a folded paper. My husband practiced his signature obsessively, said you couldn't trust banks with sloppy penmanship. She unfolded the paper. This is one of his practice sheets. Dozens of signatures, all identical. She carried it to the judge. Pierce held it beside the filed deed. His eyes narrowed. The signatures don't match. Your Honor, Sterling started. The flourish on the M is different. The pressure on the S is wrong, and the loop on the final N curves left instead of right. Pierce looked up. These were not written by the same hand. The crowd murmured. Sterling's lawyers leaned together, whispering urgently. That practice sheet could have been created at any time, Sterling said, by anyone, a grieving widow, a sympathetic friend, someone trying to frame an innocent man. Then explain this. Clara's voice cut through the noise. She turned to the crowd. Everett Wade, please stand. The farmer rose from the third row. His weathered face was pale but determined. Tell the court what you told us at the church meeting. Wade stepped forward. 2 years ago, Sterling bought my land, said I'd defaulted on payments. I hadn't paid every month on time receipts to prove it. His voice shook. But when I went to the land office, the deed had been transferred. My signature was on it, except it wasn't my signature. Someone had forged it. Sterling's smile flickered. One disgruntled farmer proves nothing. Then how about 12? Clara raised her voice. Everyone who has evidence of forgery or fraud by Wade Sterling, please stand. Silence. Then movement. One person rose, then another, then another. 12 people standing. Farmers, widows, merchants. 12 faces turned toward Sterling with years of anger burning in their eyes. The crowd exploded. Voices shouted. Accusations flew. Someone was crying. Someone else was cheering. Pierce banged his gavel. Once, twice, 3 times. "Order! I will have order in this court." The noise subsided. Barely. Sterling was pale now, the mask cracking. "Your Honor, this is a coordinated attack. These people have been coached, manipulated. Mrs. Morrison has turned legitimate business disputes into a conspiracy theory." "I have one more witness." Clara's voice was calm, too calm. Everyone turned. "A witness who saw Samuel Morrison's wagon the morning of his death. A witness who can testify that the accident wasn't an accident at all." Sterling's face went white. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Clara looked at the crowd. "Thomas Pruitt, please come forward." A young man rose from the back of the room, thin, nervous, barely 20 years old, the grain merchant's son. He walked down the aisle, each step heavy with fear. Stopped in front of the judge. "Tell them what you told me." Thomas Pruitt swallowed hard. "I was hunting that morning, up by the Morrison place. I saw—" He stopped. His voice cracked. "I saw 2 men near the wagon, before dawn. They had tools, a saw, I think. They were cutting something." "What were they cutting?" "The axle, the front axle. I didn't understand at first. But then they left and Mr. Morrison came out and he hitched the horses and—" Thomas's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know what they'd done. I swear I didn't know. Not until the wagon went over the ridge. Not until I heard he was dead." The room went silent. Clara's heart pounded so hard she could hear it. "Why didn't you come forward?" "Because one of the men saw me. Came to my father's shop the next day. Said if I told anyone they'd burn us out. Kill my sisters." Thomas was sobbing now. "I was scared. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Clara crossed to him, took his hands. "Did you recognize the men?" "One of them. I'd seen him before." Thomas looked at Sterling. "He works for you. Colt Reeves." The name hit the room like a thunderclap. Sterling shot to his feet. "This is slander lies. This boy is obviously disturbed." "Colt Reeves." Clara's voice was ice. "Your head enforcer. The man who's been threatening me for weeks. The man who told me children wander off and don't come back." Pierce's gavel slammed down. "Mr. Sterling, you will sit down, now." Sterling sat. His hands were shaking. "This court is ordering the immediate arrest of Colt Reeves for questioning in the death of Samuel Morrison." Pierce nodded to the marshals. "Find him. Bring him here." The marshals moved toward the door. "Your Honor, wait." Everyone turned. A woman was pushing through the crowd. Middle-aged, plain clothes, face streaked with tears. "I know where Reeves is. I know everything." She stumbled to the front of the room. "My name is Sarah Reeves, Colt's wife." The air left the room. Sarah Reeves stood before the judge trembling. "Colt told me things, late at night, when he'd been drinking. He told me about the Morrison wagon, about the fires, about the people who had to disappear so Mr. Sterling could have their land." "Mrs. Reeves," Sterling's lawyer started. "Shut up." Her voice cracked like a whip. "I've been quiet for 5 years. 5 years of watching my husband do terrible things. 5 years of pretending I didn't know." She looked at Clara. "Your husband was a good man. He didn't deserve what they did to him. None of them did." She reached into her coat, pulled out a leather-bound ledger. "Colt kept records, said it was insurance, in case Sterling ever turned on him." She handed the ledger to Pierce. "It's all in there. Every payment, every job, everybody." Pierce opened the ledger. His face went gray. The room held its breath. Finally, the judge looked up. "Wade Sterling, you are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and suspicion of murder in the deaths of Samuel Morrison, Robert Patterson, and—" he flipped pages. "7 others." Sterling lunged for the door. The marshals caught him before he'd gone 3 steps. "This isn't justice!" Sterling screamed. "This is a witch hunt! You can't do this to me!" "I can, and I am." Pierce stood. "Take him to the territorial jail. He'll stand trial in Helena." The marshals dragged Sterling toward the door. He fought them every step, screaming curses, threats, promises of revenge. At the threshold, he twisted around. His eyes found Clara. "You think you've won? You've destroyed everything, the railroad deal, the bank, everything I built." His voice was raw, broken. "You'll regret this, Morrison. I swear to God you'll regret this." The door slammed shut. Silence. Then chaos. People were cheering, crying, embracing. Years of fear exploding into something that looked almost like joy. Clara stood frozen in the middle of it all. Emmett pushed through the crowd, threw his arms around her waist. "Mama, we won! We won!" Clara held him tight. Her son. Her brave, stubborn, beautiful son. "Yes, baby, we won." Martha appeared beside her, tears streaming down her face. "Henry would be so proud, so proud." "I couldn't have done it without him, without you." Jonas stood at the edge of the crowd watching. His face was unreadable. Clara crossed to him. "Thank you." "For what?" "For everything. For believing in me. For standing with me when no one else would." Jonas was quiet for a long moment. "I told you, some things are worth fighting for." Clara reached up, touched his face. The scar was rough beneath her fingers. "So are some people." Something broke behind his eyes. Something that had been frozen for 5 years. "Clara?" "Not now." She smiled through her tears. "But soon, when this is really over, when the paperwork is filed and the lawyers are gone and my children are safe." "I'll wait." "I know you will." She turned back to the crowd, to the judge signing papers, to the marshals leading Sterling's lawyers away, to the 12 witnesses who'd finally found the courage to speak. It wasn't over. Not really. There would be trials, testimony, months of legal battles. But the worst was behind her. The truth was out. And Samuel's death finally meant something. She thought of him, of his hands on the deed, his voice in her ear, his promise that this land would be their children's future. "I did it, Samuel. I kept our home. I protected our babies. I hope you're proud." The sun broke through the clouds. For the first time in months, Clara felt its warmth on her face. That night, the town gathered at Martha's shop. Someone brought a fiddle. Someone else brought whiskey. The celebration lasted until well past midnight. Clara slipped away before the dancing started. She needed silence. She needed home. The cabin was dark when she arrived. Emmett and Rosie were with Martha, safe, warm-fed. She was alone for the first time in weeks. She lit the lamp, sat at the table, spread Samuel's practice sheets across the worn wood. His signature stared back at her. Dozens of times. The same loops. The same flourishes. The same careful hand. "We did it." Her voice was a whisper. "We saved our home. We stopped the man who killed you. We found justice." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I wish you could see them, Samuel. Emmett's so tall now, so brave. He reminds me of you every day. And Rosie?" She laughed through her tears. "Rosie asked me yesterday if she could marry Jonas. I told her she had to wait until she was at least 6. The lamp flickered. The wind whispered against the walls. "I'm going to be okay. We're all going to be okay." She pressed her palm against the signatures. "Thank you. For believing in me. For leaving me the truth. For loving us enough to fight, even when you knew you might lose." She sat there until the lamp burned low. Until the fire died to embers. Until the first gray light of dawn crept through the window. Then she rose, splashed water on her face, straightened her shoulders. A new day was coming, and for the first time in 8 months, she was ready to meet it. The knock came at noon. Clara opened the door. Jonas stood on the porch, hat in hand, a basket over his arm. "Martha sent food. Said you probably forgot to eat." "She's right." He stepped inside, set the basket on the table. Didn't sit. "How are you?" "Tired, relieved, scared." "Scared?" Clara laughed. It sounded strange, foreign. "I've been fighting so long I don't know how to stop. Don't know what comes next." Jonas was quiet for a moment. "What do you want to come next?" She looked at him, at his steady eyes, his careful hands, the patience he'd carried for 5 years without complaint. "I want to rebuild. The farm, the children's future, everything Sterling tried to destroy." She paused. "And I want to not be alone anymore." Jonas stepped closer. "You don't have to be." "I know." Her voice cracked. "But I need time. To grieve properly. To heal. To figure out who I am when I'm not fighting for survival." "I understand. Do you—" He reached out, took her hand. His fingers were warm, rough, real. "Clara, I waited 5 years for a chance to make Sterling pay. I can wait a little longer for you." She squeezed his hand. "Thank you." "For what?" "For being patient. For not pushing. For—" She searched for the words. "For seeing me. Not the widow. Not the victim. Just me." Jonas lifted her hand, pressed his lips to her knuckles. "I've always seen you. From the first moment at the auction gate. When you held up that ring and asked me to buy your last piece of hope." His voice roughened. "You were the bravest thing I'd ever seen. Still are." Clara's chest ached. In a good way. In a way she'd forgotten was possible. "Stay for dinner." "The children are with Martha until tomorrow. I'm alone tonight, and I don't want to be." Jonas's eyes searched her face. "Are you sure?" "No." She smiled. "But I'm tired of being sure. I'm tired of being careful. I just want—" She stopped, started again. "I just want to feel alive again." He didn't kiss her. Not yet. But he pulled her close, held her against his chest, let her hear his heartbeat. "You are alive. You survived. You won. We won. We won." They stood like that for a long time. Two broken people holding each other up, learning how to breathe again. Outside, the sun set over the mountains. The sky turned gold, then red, then purple. Inside, something new was beginning. Something that felt like hope. Something that felt like home. 3 weeks passed. The snow began to melt. Water dripped from the cabin eaves, and the first patches of brown earth appeared in the yard. Clara stood at the window watching Emmett stack firewood. His movements were stronger now, more confident. He'd grown 2 inches since January, filling out his father's old coat. Rosie played nearby, building a fort from the melting snowdrifts, laughing at nothing. They were healing. All of them. A rider appeared on the ridge. Clara's hand went to her apron pocket, then stopped. The revolver wasn't there anymore. She'd put it away last week. Didn't need it anymore. The rider came closer. Martha Doyle. Clara opened the door. News from Helena. Martha climbed down from her horse, her face flushed from the cold ride. "The territorial court issued its ruling this morning." Clara's heart stopped. "And—" Martha smiled. The first real smile Clara had seen on her face in months. Sterling confessed. Everything. The forgeries, the bribes, the murders. All of it. She pulled a folded newspaper from her saddlebag. "He's been sentenced to hang. Execution set for June." Clara's legs gave out. She grabbed the doorframe. "It's over. It's over." Martha pressed the newspaper into her hands. "Your land is clear. The deed's been restored to its original form. Your name, Samuel's name, just as it should be. Emmett appeared at Clara's elbow. Mama. What happened? Clara pulled him close, held him tight. We're safe. Really safe. Forever. Sterling's going to prison. Worse. Clara's voice shook. He's going to answer for what he did, to your father, to all of them. Emmett was quiet for a moment. Then his shoulders began to shake. He was crying. For the first time since Samuel's funeral, her brave little man was crying. Clara held him while he sobbed. Held him while 3 months of fear and anger and grief poured out of him. Held him until there was nothing left but exhaustion and relief. I miss Pa, he whispered. I know, baby. I miss him too. He would have wanted to see this, to see Sterling lose. He sees it. Clara kissed his forehead. Wherever he is, he sees it. And he's proud of you. So proud. Rosie ran up snow, clinging to her mittens. Why is Emmett crying? Is he hurt? No, sweetheart, he's not hurt. Clara gathered both children in her arms. He's happy. We're all happy. Because we're finally free. Yet, the celebration lasted 3 days. People came from across the territory. Farmers who'd lost land to Sterling. Widows whose husbands had died in suspicious accidents. Merchants who'd been threatened into silence. They gathered at the Morrison homestead, bringing food, bringing gifts, bringing stories. Your husband was a good man, Everett Wade said, shaking Clara's hand. He stood up when the rest of us were too scared. We owe him everything. You owe him nothing. Clara's voice was steady. Just promise me you'll stand up next time. Don't wait for someone else to go first. Yes, ma'am. I promise. Jonas stayed close but kept his distance. He understood. Clara needed space, needed time to process everything that had happened. But she noticed him. Noticed the way he watched her from across the yard. Noticed the way he smiled when Emmett showed him the new fence posts he'd helped build. Noticed the way he carried Rosie on his shoulders when her legs got tired. He was good with them, natural, like he'd been waiting his whole life for a family to call his own. On the 3rd night after the last guests had gone and the children were asleep, Clara found him on the porch. You're still here. Didn't want to leave. He didn't look at her. Didn't feel right. She sat beside him on the step. The moon was full. The air smelled like wet earth and new growth. Jonas. Yeah, thank you. He finally turned. His eyes were soft in the moonlight. You already thanked me. I know, but I mean it. Really mean it. She took a breath. When Samuel died, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd spend the rest of my days just surviving, just holding on until I couldn't hold on anymore. And now I want more than surviving. She met his eyes. I want to live, really live, and I want... She stopped, started again. I want you to be part of that. Jonas was quiet for a long moment. Clara, I need to tell you something. Her stomach dropped. What? I've been offered a job, territorial marshal, based in Helena. He paused. It's good money, steady work, the kind of thing I've been waiting for my whole life. Clara's heart cracked. You're leaving. I turned it down. She blinked. What? I turned it down. This morning, before Martha brought the news. Jonas reached for her hand. His fingers were warm, rough, real. I told them I couldn't leave Elkhorn. Told them I had responsibilities here, people who needed me. Jonas. I love you, Clara. The words hung in the air. I've loved you since the day you walked up to that auction gate with nothing but a wedding ring and more courage than any man I've ever met. I loved you when you stood up to Sterling. When you fought for your children. When you refused to break no matter how hard they pushed. Tears streamed down Clara's face. I'm not asking for anything, Jonas continued. I know it's too soon. I know you're still healing. But I need you to know that I'm not going anywhere. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. He squeezed her hand. I'll wait as long as it takes, because you're worth waiting for. Clara couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. She leaned forward, pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft, tentative, like testing ice on a frozen pond. Then Jonas's arms came around her, and the ice broke, and everything she'd been holding back for 8 months came flooding out. They kissed until the moon moved across the sky, until the cold seeped through their clothes, until Clara finally pulled back, breathless, laughing, crying. I love you too. Jonas's face split into a grin. Yeah. She wiped her eyes. God help me, I do. He pulled her close, rested his chin on the top of her head. So what happens now? Now. Clara thought about it. Now we take it slow. Rebuild. Heal. Let the children get used to having you around. They already like me. Rosie asked if she could marry you. Jonas laughed. The sound was warm, rich, real. What did you tell her? I told her she had to wait until she was at least 6. Clara smiled. But I might have to reconsider. She's pretty stubborn. Wonder where she gets that from. Clara elbowed him. He laughed again. They sat on the porch until dawn, talking, planning, dreaming. For the first time in 8 months, the future didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a promise. Spring arrived in a rush of green and gold. The fields came alive. Wildflowers pushed through the soil. Birds returned to the trees, filling the air with song. Clara planted the first seeds in April. Emmett helped her dig the furrows, his young shoulders straining under the work. Rosie followed behind, dropping seeds into the earth with careful precision. Mama! Rosie looked up, dirt smudging her nose. When the flowers grow, can we pick some for Papa's grave? Clara's throat tightened. Of course, baby. He'd like that. Jonas arrived mid-morning with lumber in his wagon. He'd been working on the barn for weeks, replacing rotted boards, reinforcing the foundation, making it strong enough to last another generation. The Morrison place is starting to look like a real homestead again, Martha said, stopping by with fresh bread. Samuel would be proud. I hope so. I know so. Martha squeezed her arm. You've done something remarkable, Clara. Not just saving your land, saving your family, saving yourself. Clara looked at the fields, at the children playing, at Jonas carrying lumber across the yard. I had help. We all need help. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. Martha headed back toward her wagon. I'll see you Sunday. Church service. Reverend Miller wants to say a few words about the Sterling verdict. We'll be there. The days settled into a rhythm. Work, rest, meals together at the cabin table. Jonas stayed late most nights helping with chores, reading stories to the children, sitting with Clara on the porch after the sun went down. He didn't push, didn't rush, just stayed. And slowly, Clara felt something she'd thought she'd lost forever. Peace. The letter arrived in May. Clara recognized the handwriting on the envelope. Elegant. Precise. The kind of penmanship they taught in fancy Eastern schools. What is it? Jonas looked up from the fence he was mending. I don't know. Clara tore open the seal, read the letter, read it again. Her hands began to shake. Clara, what's wrong? The railroad. Her voice came out strangled. They want to buy an easement through my property, for the switching station Sterling was trying to steal. Jonas set down his hammer. How much? $12,000. The number hung in the air. $12,000. More money than Clara had ever dreamed of. More than enough to secure the children's future. To rebuild the farm. To start fresh. That's... Jonas shook his head. That's a fortune. I know. What are you going to do? Clara looked at the letter. At Samuel's fields, stretching toward the mountains. At the cabin he'd built with his own hands. I'm going to accept. Jonas's eyebrows rose. You're sure? Samuel knew about this. That's why he wouldn't sell to Sterling. He knew the railroad was coming. He knew the land would be worth something someday. Tears pricked her eyes. He was protecting us. Even then. Even before he knew what Sterling was planning. She folded the letter carefully. The easement only takes 20 acres. The rest stays ours. The cabin, the fields, everything that matters. She looked at Jonas. It's what Samuel would have wanted. Security for the children. A future we can build on. Jonas crossed to her, took her hands. Then we build on it. Together. Together. He kissed her forehead. Gentle, reverent. I'm proud of you. For what? For everything. For surviving. For fighting. For choosing hope when despair would have been easier. He smiled. You're the strongest person I've ever known, Clara Morrison, and I'm honored to stand beside you. Clara leaned into him. Let his strength hold her up. I couldn't have done it alone. You weren't alone. You never were. He pulled back, cupped her face in his hands. And you never will be again. I promise. Summer came early that year. The railroad surveyors arrived in June, marking the easement boundaries with wooden stakes and colored flags. Clara watched them work from the cabin porch, Rosie on her lap, Emmett at her side. That's where the trains will come through? Emmett asked. That's right. Will they be loud? Probably, but you'll get used to it. Clara smiled. And every time one passes, you can remember that this land belongs to us. That your father fought for it. That we kept it. Emmett nodded slowly. I think Pa would like trains. I think he would too. The first payment arrived in July. Clara deposited half in the Territorial Bank. The other half she divided between improvements to the homestead and a trust fund for the children. You're being smart about this, Martha said approvingly. Most people would spend it all at once. Most people didn't watch their husband die for this land. Clara's voice was steady. Every dollar means something. Every decision matters. I won't waste what Samuel gave us. Jonas proposed in August. He did it properly. Asked Emmett's permission first, then Rosie's. Knelt in the yard at sunset, ring in hand, voice shaking. Clara Jane Morrison. I know I'm not Samuel. I'm not trying to replace him. But I love you. I love your children. I love this land and everything it represents. He took a breath. Will you let me be part of your family? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to make you happy? Clara looked at him. At this broken, beautiful man who'd waited 5 years for a chance to love again. Yes. The wedding was small, just family and close friends. Martha served as witness. Emmett gave Clara away, his young face solemn with the weight of the responsibility. Rosie threw wildflowers instead of rice. You're my papa now, she told Jonas after the ceremony. Jonas knelt to meet her eyes. I'm honored, sweetheart. I'll do my best to deserve it. Promise. Promise. She threw her arms around his neck. Jonas held her tight, tears streaming down his weathered face. Clara watched them. Her daughter, her husband, her new beginning. Samuel would have approved. She was sure of it. The first train came through in September. The whole town gathered to watch. The engine roared over the Morrison easement whistle, screaming wheels churning smoke, billowing against the blue sky. Emmett stood at the fence line, eyes wide. It's huge. It's progress. Clara put her hand on his shoulder. Your father saw this coming. He knew this land would be important someday. That's why he held on. Even when Sterling threatened him. Even then, Clara's voice thickened. He never stopped believing, never stopped fighting. And because of that, we're standing here today, watching the future roll through our backyard. Emmett was quiet for a moment. I want to be like him. Brave like him. You already are. Clara pulled him close. You've been brave since the day he died. Braver than you know. The train disappeared over the ridge. The crowd dispersed. Life went on. But something had changed. Something permanent. Something good. The Morrison homestead wasn't just surviving anymore. It was thriving. Fall brought the harvest. The best harvest Clara had ever seen. Jonas worked alongside Emmett in the fields, teaching him how to read the soil, how to predict the weather, how to coax life from stubborn earth. Rosie started school. She came home each day with stories about her new friends, her favorite books, the songs they learned in music class. The cabin filled with laughter again. Real laughter. The kind that came from deep in the belly and echoed off the walls. Clara stood at the window one evening watching Jonas and Emmett haul the last of the wheat to the barn. The sun set gold behind them, painting their silhouettes in fire. You're smiling, she turned. Martha stood in the doorway, a basket of preserves in her arms. I am... First time I've seen you smile like that since Samuel passed. Martha set the basket on the table. It looks good on you. Clara looked back at the window, at her family, her home, her life. I thought I'd never smile again. After Samuel, after everything Sterling did. She shook her head. I thought the best parts of my life were behind me. And now? Clara considered the question. Now I think the best parts are just beginning. Martha hugged her, tight, fierce. He'd be so proud of you, Samuel. He'd be so damn proud. I know. Clara's voice broke. I know. Winter came again. But this time it was different. The cabin was warm. The pantry was full. The children were healthy, happy, safe. Clara sat by the fire on Christmas Eve, Jonas beside her Emmett, reading to Rosie from a picture book. Snow fell outside. The wind whispered against the walls. But inside, everything was still. Mama? Rosie looked up from her book. Is Santa going to find us this year? Of course, baby. Even though we moved the furniture around? Clara laughed. Santa always finds good children, no matter where they are. Rosie nodded satisfied and went back to her book. Jonas leaned close. You're happy. I am. I mean really happy. Not just surviving. Not just holding on. Clara looked at him, at her children, at the home Samuel had built and she had saved. I am really happy, she said. For the first time in, I don't know how long, maybe forever. Jonas kissed her temple. Good, you deserve it. So do you. I have everything I need. He pulled her closer. Everything I ever wanted. They sat together in the firelight, watching the children, listening to the wind, feeling the warmth of their new life. Outside, the world was cold and dark and dangerous, but inside, there was love, there was family, there was home, and that was enough. That was everything. The letter came on New Year's Day. Clara recognized the official seal. Territorial Courthouse. Helena. She opened it with steady hands. What is it? Jonas looked up from his coffee. Clara read the words. Read them again, a third time. Sterling's dead. Jonas went still. The execution. Last week, December 28th. Clara set the letter down. They're asking if I want his personal effects, anything from his estate that might help the victims rebuild. Do you... Clara thought about it. About the man who had killed her husband, who had tried to steal her land, who had threatened her children. She thought about hate, about revenge, about the poison of holding on to anger. No. She folded the letter. I don't want anything from him. I just want him gone. He is gone. I know. Clara looked at Jonas, at the new ring on her finger, at the life they were building together. And I'm finally free. Jonas took her hand. We both are. Spring returned, and with it, new life. Clara's belly swelled with her third child. A miracle, the doctor said. At her age, after everything she'd been through. But Clara knew better. It wasn't a miracle. It was a gift. She stood at Samuel's grave on the first warm day of April. The wildflowers Rosie had planted last year were blooming purple and gold against the gray stone. "I'm pregnant," she said quietly. "Jonas is over the moon. Emmett's hoping for a brother. Rosie wants a sister she can dress up." She knelt, touched the cold stone. "I'll never forget you. Never stop loving you. But I've learned something this year. Something important." She took a breath. Love doesn't run out. It multiplies. The love I have for Jonas doesn't take away from what I had with you. It adds to it, makes it bigger, stronger. The wind stirred. The flowers swayed. "Thank you. For everything you gave me. For the children. For this land. For the courage to fight when everyone else wanted me to quit." Tears streamed down her face. "I'll tell the baby about you, about how brave you were, how much you loved us, how you saved us even after you were gone." She pressed her lips to the stone. Cold, rough, real. "Goodbye, Samuel. Rest easy. We're going to be okay." She rose, walked back toward the cabin. Jonas waited on the porch, Emmett and Rosie beside him. "Everything all right?" he called. Clara looked at her family, at the home they'd saved, at the future stretching out before them, bright and beautiful and full of possibility. "Everything's perfect." She climbed the steps. Let Jonas wrap his arms around her. Let her children press close against her legs. The sun warmed her face. The wind carried the scent of new growth. And Clara Morrison Brennan knew deep in her bones that the worst was behind her. The land was saved. The children were safe. Love had found her again. And this time, nothing would take it away. Because she had learned the only lesson that mattered. The truth always wins. The brave always rise. And those who fight for what they love, who never give up, who hold on even when holding on seems impossible, they always find their way home.